All right. Hey, listen, we're in a series we started last week of the last year. And so we're however many weeks that is into it. And it's kind of a three-part series. And so I know some of you are tired of the rehash, but I think it's essential that we do just so we know where we're going. But we have entitled this series of the new year, Better You, Better Life, right? And so without that seeming and sounding man-centered, I think it's important that we just preface that, right? That God came to transform us, right? This is his deal. That he who began a good work would complete it in us, that he would transform us. He didn't call us to just behave, but to become something new. That involves you and me putting off the old man and putting on the new, to get rid of those areas of our life that are chasing after things that don't matter, and to really pursue the things that do. And so as we do that, we become a better person in that sense. There's a better us. And where there's a better us, there's a better life. And so we've been talking about how to make those things happen, how to be how a better you will make for a better life, right? If you and I decrease and Christ increases in us, then the result of that is that we become more like him, which means we're a lot better version of ourselves than we could be. And that better version always creates a better life, not just for me or you, but for those around us. And so this is what we've been looking at. And we chose to look at it in the 7 key areas of life, the 7 areas that we find that we walk in and out of on a constant daily basis. And so what the goal of this is that you and I would set some goals in each of those areas about where we want to be, right? How we want God to do in our life, and what would it look like if those things happened, and how can I take, let's say that my family life is maybe what I would call a 6. How can I get my marriage and my family to a 7 or to an 8? What steps do I need to do? We've asked this question to ourselves. How can I let it get better, right? I think that's a powerful question. I ask myself that question in so many different ways. How can I let it get better? Now, because I say what needs to happen for it to get better, I can then start pointing the fingers, right? Oh, well, if she'll do this and if he'll, right? But if I just say, how can I let it get better? It forces me to have to deal with the things that I can control, the things that I can do. And so we've been looking at these, and we've looked at them in the 7 key areas. We looked at them in the area of faith. What can I do to let my faith get better? How can I be a better version of myself? I asked this in some of my men's groups that gather, Better Men. And the question that I ask about faith is, what does a spiritual you look like? Right? What does a more spiritual version of Randy look like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does he think? What does he do? It's a crazy thought. It kind of rocked every one of the little small groups that I have as we talked about those things. But it's a great question just to ask. And so in the area of faith, what can I do to let it get better? In the area of my family, right? That place that God planted me. And those people that are either above me, my moms and dad, or beside me, my brothers and sisters, or next to me, my spouse, or below me, my children, or even further down the line, my grandchildren, my aunts and uncles, and all of that plays a part in that. How can I let that family get better? Doesn't that excite you to think about the fact that you can do some things that will make that get better? Not just our family, but how about our friendships? How can we take those friendships and make them deeper, make them more meaningful, make them more impactful? How can I impact my friends in a greater way? How can I create an environment where my friends can impact me in a greater way? What friends do I need to kind of move to the edges of my life because maybe they aren't in a place that they can affect me and I can affect them. But what are those that are my go-to and the close ones, and how can I let that get better? Right? When you think about that too, isn't that an excitement when you start thinking, what goals can I set to get there? How about the area of your field? That area where you find that you spend a lot of portion of your time, where you plow, so to speak, either making money or are pursuing a passion, whatever it is. If you're a single, if you're a stay-at-home mom, or and so that becomes your field. That's that place that God's given to you. Maybe it's the workplace. Maybe you're retired, but you've got these passions or these hobbies, and so it's that area field where you spend your time making a difference. And so what does that look like? What does a better you do? How can it create a better area in that? And the area of fitness. So we think of fitness, not just physical strength, but the area of our emotional health and our mental health, right? How can we be better physically fit, emotionally fit, and then mentally fit? Because a better mental state of mind is going to create a better me. A better emotional state is going to create a better me, and a better physical me. Where I take care of what God has given to me, and I seek to just keep that old thing running. It's a better me. And so we've talked about those things. We talked about finances. How can I let that area of my money, right? I do three things with money. I spend money, I give money, and I save money, right? And so how can I do that better? How can I make it? How can I let my money grow? How can I save in a way that lets me leverage that money? How can I spend my money more wisely to be a good steward of that? And then who needs some help along the way, and that I can take out of what I have given, I have worked for, and pass along to somebody else. And then we just talked about fun, right? And then we kind of played off the Sabbath aspect of that, where there's just this rest, right? Where we just shut the world out for a second, all the responsibilities, and we just enjoy the moment, right? Whether it's climbing a mountain, or it's swimming in the ocean, whether it's dinner with friends, whether it's just time in the Word, whether it's taking that nap. How can we enjoy? How can we do that and make those things better? This is where we've been. So we looked at those, and it took us about 7 weeks to get through those. And then we started looking at what happens is when you and me try to get better in those areas, right? It seems like the world conspires against us, right? And so there are these obstacles, what we would call strongholds. And all of us have them. All of them have these weaknesses that keep us from getting where it is that we want to go. But if we deal with them, if we name them and deal with them and in a godly fashion, we can move through those. And so we looked at some of those. We looked at fear, and if fear were gone out of your life, or courage replaced it, what would the area where you work look like? Would you still be there, or would you have bailed and gone somewhere else because your real passion isn't there, but it's over here? You're just afraid to go over there because you don't know about the money situation, and if it's all of those things. How removing fear from your relationships, what would that do? What would it do to have courage to do the things that you should do with your friends, but you're afraid they may think something's weird about you? Or that you may have honest conversations which you're afraid to do because you're afraid you may lose them, right? And so we talked in terms of those. We talked in terms of guilt and shame, because guilt and shame it'll make us feel unworthy and keep us from doing the things that we want to do, because we somehow in our mind believe we don't deserve it. And so we let guilt and shame come in. Sometimes anger is one of those other obstacles, strongholds that can come in. And just sheer anger will keep me from enjoying anything. Anger steals so much. And so if you've got that anger and you don't deal with it, then you're not going to be happy anywhere. And you're never going to find good life anywhere. And then we talked about laziness, just slothfulness, and we attached that maybe a lack of focus, right? And so, but what would it look like if we could get a hold of that stronghold, and we could be active, and we could be focused on the things that matter, and not just lazy and letting our mind wander, or lazy and just laying around. And then we talked in terms of envy. How if I just don't start comparing myself to others, if I don't look at what somebody else's life is and start wishing that was mine, but I stay in my lane and enjoy the place that God's given to me, life is so much better. So we talked about those. Now we've switched gears and we've looked at, but what are those things? If there are strongholds, there are other things that we would call attractional, things that are powerful in our life. That when those attitudes are there, It's a game changer for us. And how can we get those in our life? And so last week we looked at the first one, gratitude, and how powerful the attitude of gratitude is. And then when I'm just grateful, everything is better, right? And so you can go back and listen to that. We looked at that last week. Today, I want us to talk in terms of another one, an attitude, and it's the one called love, right? When you are loving, now before you get that, oh, here we go, love, the love message, right? Can we just have this conversation? Because I think you're going to find, we're going to learn some things together about some of the friends that love brings into our situation. It seems like all of these things bring friends with them, right? Love always brings a sense of passion and some humility, and so those three together is this dynamic power that we should look at. And so love means that I'm humble toward people and I'm passionate about a better life. And so let's just kind of talk about these. These are attractional qualities, like I've said. And so let's just talk about love. Love is one of those words. It's we can give a definition for it 1,000 different ways. I love how when Paul wrote the classic phrase and poem there in 1 Corinthians 13, he doesn't say this is the definition. He just says love is. He just describes it, right? Love is patient, love is kind, all of those concepts. So if we were to boil it down to a practical working definition, we would say that love is to care genuinely, to genuinely care for people, right? We have a ton of people who say, oh, man, I love you, but when you need them, you can't find them, right? You know why? Well, I mean, not always, but for a lot of reasons, it's because they were just words that flowed. There was no genuine caring. People who really love you, they show up for you, right? And they're there, and you know it. And man, I've been blessed to have those kind of people in my life that are just loving people. I've got a friend today, and I remember, man, I was going through some tough stuff and found myself in some trouble, and I just wanted to hide. And my buddy Alan had called, and I didn't want to talk to anybody, just wasn't interested in doing any of that. And I don't know what, it was probably about 10 o'clock at night. Man, I heard somebody knocking at my door, and I opened it up, and there's my friend Alan there, and he said, well, I called you and you didn't answer, and so I'm just coming in. I just want to sit with you. And I thought, man, how powerful that is. See, and I've never forgotten that. I realized that day, at that moment, that man, he loves me. He genuinely cared for me. He didn't have to do anything. He could have given up on the first phone call, but he didn't, because he genuinely cared. And that's the kind of love we're talking about. Now listen, there was nothing I could give him. This is how we know what real love is. Love is when we genuinely care, knowing that person can't really do anything for me, or not expecting that person to do anything for me. And so when you can develop, and this is a love that develops. In fact, God teaches us how to do that. That's what Paul told the Thessalonians, that you've been taught by God to love one another, right? It's a God teaching thing. We love because he first loved us. And so we see how he loves us. And then we can't help but reciprocate. Why not? Because the Spirit of the living God who lives within us is causing that love to be awakened in us. And so for a Christ follower, this should be something that's inherently in us. But it's about caring, right? And listen, it's a game changer. You have the power to change someone's life by simply caring about them, right? By genuinely caring for them. Man, it's been 2 or 3 years probably since Tammy and I have been watching American Idol, and I don't know how we stumbled on it this year, but we've seen 2 of the episodes, and this is the part of American Idol where they're bringing in the talent, and some of them are just awful, and then some of them are really good, and some are okay. What I've been blown away with this year are the stories. What I realized is that everybody's what we always say, everybody's about that far from cracking up. And you see these kids coming in there, and man, they just don't believe in themselves, and they're just kind of a wreck. No, and it's kind of their last stand. But they feel like they need to do this. Now you've got a lot that aren't, but those that do are that. And I watch as like one like Lionel Richie, Katy Perry, or Luke Bryan, any of those. You can see at some point that there's this love for that person. and they just care. And that sometimes they'll get up from around that desk and they'll go hug them, or they'll do whatever they have to with them, and just to encourage them. I saw Lionel Richie look at one guy and say, listen, I know people have told you you're not enough. I'm here to tell you they're wrong. You are enough. Man, see, those are loving, caring, that's attractional things, man. It's a game changer. When you have that kind of a thing, it's easy to find fault in people. But when you genuinely care about people, you're not trying to find the faults in them. Fault finders are people who have low self-esteem. Fault finders are those who have an esteem issue, and to compensate for it, want to think they have their act together and always find fault in you. It's always that way. Don't be that. You'll never enjoy your best life, a better life than you will when you just love. It's just to care. Because people are human, they qualify. You never look into the eyes of someone that God doesn't love. So we should lock eyes with those around the world, and we should love them, right? This is who we are. Pride is the thing that destroys and prevents that. And so Paul tells the Roman church, he says, let your love be without hypocrisy, right? What's he saying? The same thing we're saying here. Let it be sincere. Romans 12:9, right? Let love be without hypocrisy. And so this is important, that we don't play like you love somebody. Genuinely do so. And it's powerful when you do that. It's really the cusp of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Everything God wants us to do is to love Him with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbors ourselves, right? So the golden rule is simply this. If the tables were turned, how would I want to be treated? You want to know how to love somebody? Man, I just want to love, but I'm not sure how. Well, just do for them what it is that you would like somebody to do for you. I know you probably read some of the love language books and all of those things, and you've looked through that. You got to realize, and I think you do, whatever your love language is, like my love language is words of affirmation and touch. And so it's no coincidence that when I meet people, man, I'm gonna grab your hand and I'm gonna grab your shoulder. I can't help but just touch, because it's how I receive love and how I feel love, and so I give it. So you're gonna find that you'll probably, whatever your love language is, you're going to ooze that out toward other people, and let it ooze, let it flow out. Right? Love people when you get the chance. Love people. It's that thing that causes you just to want to stop and help somebody in need. Man, I had two great examples of love, and it was my mom and dad. And I know people can exaggerate all of that stuff. I'm just telling you. My mom was the greatest, most loving person I have ever seen in my life. And my dad was right there with her. Man, if there was somebody on the side of the road and they had their hood up, I knew my dad was going to pull our car over. He was going to open up our trunk. He was going to check on them. He was going to pull out whatever tool he needed. He was going to help them fix that car, because he just loved and cared for people. And he would do that time and time again. Somebody needed help, man. We were always going. Wherever it was, we were always going, because somebody needed that. My mom never missed a funeral. My mom never missed one of those things, because she knew that people needed love at that point. My mom would write letters and notes to people. If you knew my mom or you knew my dad, you knew they were some loving folk, and they oozed it, and their life was better because of that. This is what I'm talking about. So how do we do that? Practically, how do we do that? Well, I think there's two things that we work on. One is passion, and so let's just talk a little bit about what passion is, because that's a powerful term. It literally means to suffer. When someone talks about the passion of the Christ, passion literally means to suffer, to have this death, so to speak. And for Christ, it was a death to everything about himself. And so, in fact, the scriptures, Hebrews 12:2 says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He was passionate. He endured. That's a great word for what passion means. It means to suffer, to endure. Like you're willing to put up with anything because of what that passion will bring to you. It's an intense enthusiasm, right? It is a soul on fire. One of my groups of people that I hang out with, Kerry Oberbrunner, he's always talking about be a soul on fire. In fact, he created a ministry and a publishing company called Igniting Souls and Souls on Fire. I think I've got a shirt that says that. But it's just you when you're a soul on fire, when you show up filled up and you're ready to go, it's a game changer. And so when you show up for family functions and you show up at work and you show up at your gathering of church, you show up for your friends, right? Where you're all in and there's a passion that you are caught up in that you are enthusiastic about it, it's a game changer. It's like David. I don't even remember David after he had brought the ark in. He was celebrating. He was dancing before the Lord, and he didn't have anything on but like his underwear in a sense. That's kind of what they call it. And his wife's looking out the window, and she's going, "Man, what are you doing? That is so undignified. What are you doing?" And he looks at her and he says, "Oh, pardon me, paraphrase. Babe, you ain't seen nothing yet, right? I will become much more indignified than this," right? And so there was this point where he didn't care what anybody else thought. He was so enthused about the God that he knew that he was going to dance like no one's watching, right? And in fact, that's what he was doing. And there's so many that are like that. Polycarp, who was John, the aged apostle, was one of his understudies. Polycarp, when he was being put to the stake to be burned, and they were about to tie his hands, Polycarp looks at the young man that's tying his hands, and he says, "You don't need to tie my hands, for I will not run from the flames that carry me to my Savior." You see, that's a man, that's a soul on fire. That's a man passionate about what he does. One of the things I learned early on in my ministry, I'm a Spurgeon fan, read Spurgeon as much as I can, but one of the statements Spurgeon made in his lectures to my students was, if you can do anything else in life, you should do it. What he was trying to do is run his students off. Listen, if you can go be a tailor, go do it. If you can go be a mechanic, well, then go do it. And man, I got to tell you, I cannot not preach. I can't. I'm so passionate, enthusiastic about that. Because I preach every day, every morning. 6 o'clock, man. I'm gonna be up preaching if I can, unless I'm off somewhere else. And I've tried to quit church. I've tried to do so many things. We house church for a bit because I was so frustrated with church, and that didn't last long. I can't do that. There's just something in me, and it's called passion. And so you can have passion toward anything if you know that it's what pleases the Lord. And so you just let that come up, and man, let it come out of you. Just be enthusiastic about that. Well, and then the other thing, and this is powerful too, it's important that we look at, is this thing called humility. Now, humility is a lot like love, but it's got that little punch at the end of it. It is literally, humility is a word that was invented, most would say, by the apostles, Paul and others. It's two words they put together in the Koine Greek, and it simply means to think low. And Paul used that phrase in so many different times after he had just told the Ephesian church how blessed they were and how they got there not of their own accord because they were dead in their trespasses and sins, but God was mercy and made them alive so that they could do the good works that God had called them to and that he had put them into and built and is building, using them as human blocks to build the dwelling place of God, the house of God, the church. He says in chapter 4, I urge you then to walk worthy of this calling. By doing what? Well, by being completely humble. And he uses the word there. Then he's telling the Philippian church who's concerned about him because he's in prison and it's just rough for him. And he's like, man, rejoice. Just rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice with me, right? And then he says this, humble yourselves in the same way that Christ humbled himself. Not thinking being equal with God was something to be really, proud about, but humbled himself. Laying aside all of his attributes of godliness, becoming a man so that he could save us, right? That's that. So that is to think low. Now, to think low doesn't mean to think less of yourself, like, oh, woe is me, I'm just no good. That's not humility. You have people all the time say, he's so humble because he's never really bragging about himself. That's not it. It's not that. It's not to think less of yourself. It's to to think about yourself less, right? Not to think less of yourself, but to think about yourself less. So when I'm in a conversation with someone, the loving thing to do when I attach humility to it isn't to be thinking when they're talking about what I'm going to say next, but to listen to what they're doing, right? To not think about, I need to say this or I need to do that. No, I'm going to be in that moment. I'm going to be listening to your conversation. See, that's what it is. And so, Ephesians 4:2 reminds us that it's the way of Jesus, that you and me we should be humble. And so this is what I wanted to bring to us today, that you and me might know how it is that we can live a really, really rich life, right? What are those qualities that we need to propel ourselves further in the area of my faith, in the area of my family and of my friends and of my field, that area where I work, and of my finances and my fitness and my fun? Man, when I'm just grateful for where I am, it's a game changer. And when I bring loving into that grateful attitude and world, and that love is filled with a passion, an enthusiasm, a willing to suffer, a willing to do whatever I need to for the sake of others, and there's a humility about me, there's no limit. Man, I couldn't wait to share that with you today. And so let's just think about that, and hey, today let's just start taking some action steps in that way. When you see people, you look at them and you say, "Hey, I love you," right? Just get in the habit of saying, "I love you," right? Just do that. And then start doing acts that demonstrate that you love people, right? Use your love language, but love people, all right? Get after it. Man, I love you guys, and can't wait to be with you next week. We're going to sing our way out of here today, and I'm hoping you guys have a great afternoon.